Hello and welcome to this week's training on conscious communication. And to truly be a self-empowered woman who is attracting co-empowered relationships into your life and your business, you need to master the art of effective communication. And this is a topic that is not taught in school, which is why we do have this in the School of Feminine Fortune. And there are a couple of different components that I'm going to teach you about, and I will reference the places that I derived them from to have the process that I have in my own communication and in my own conversations with people. First and foremost, I spent time studying with Marshall Rosenberg, who has the Center for Nonviolent Communication. And I learned a tremendous amount there. And I like how he breaks it down to be very elementary, very understandable. And essentially what he says is that there are needs that everyone has. And when your needs are being met, then your emotions over here are going to be happy, joyful, fulfilled, connected. And then when your needs are not being met, you're going to have feelings like disconnection, unhappiness, sad, disappointed, frustrated. The list goes on. You can go to his website and you can actually download the dittos on this you can print them out. That's why I'm calling them a ditto. But basically you can go there and you can have the needs list. And if you are a coach, this is a great tool to have. And there is a difference between needs and neediness. And the other component of communication that I have studied and derived content from, and this process that I have from, and I'll go back to the nonviolent communication, but I want to show you how I've derived them, and that way you'll understand them better, is from a process called inner bonding by Margaret Paul. And you can certainly go to that website. It's innerbonding.com. And essentially, Margaret Paul talks about needs versus neediness. And when someone is in a place of neediness, it is kind of a yucky feeling energy, and you'll feel it. When you're in a place of self-empowerment, it will be an energy that repels you, because there's a difference between someone being empowered and coming and saying, I have this need for fill in the blank, and I'm wondering if you'd be willing to. And as I script this out for you, I'll kind of go back and forth between the two to demonstrate where I've derived this from. So Marshall Rosenberg talks about what foundation of which you want someone to respond to you. And so when someone is coming from a place of neediness, it is saying, I'm feeling codependent and I need you to do this, and without you doing this, then I'm not whole and I'm not approved, and so on and so on. And it just feels, quite frankly, yucky. I call it Atari energy. And then with Margaret Paul's work, she talks about when you're in a communication and you're in a conversation with someone, you are coming from a place of wanting to learn about the other person and their experience, or you're coming from a place of protection where you're defensive. And I'm going to demonstrate how you're going to handle that in your communications with whomever it is that you're in communication with. But I wanted you to understand the foundational principles here of effective communication so that you can be empowered in your conversations with whomever it is that you're speaking with. So getting to this place where you are detached from what the other person is willing to do, and then being in your feminine energy to invite someone into a conversation with you and allowing them to respond because you've made a decision that you no longer want to engage anyone in a request that you may have or in any kind of communication or connection unless they're coming from a willingness to have a desire to do so, versus feeling like they're obligated, versus feeling like you're not going to like them or approve of them from here on out if they don't do what you're asking them to do. You give someone the free will of autonomy. You give them the ability to make that decision as to what response they're going to have to your request. And then when you're in the communication with the other person, you want to make sure that they're always in a place of wanting to learn. And if they move into a place of wanting to protect, or you move into a place of wanting to protect, you need to be aware of the energy that you bring to every conversation that you have. And when you're aware of this, then you can either move yourself. If you're at a higher level of self-mastery, you will have the ability to move yourself in the conversation from a place of defensiveness back into a place of learning. But if you're new to this, you might want to say, listen, I'm feeling a bit defensive. An indication that you're defensive is you're starting to raise your voice, or you might even be cussing, or you're becoming angry. And that's not a place of effective communication. So this is where you get to stop yourself and prevent damage that can be done that is really awful damage. It really is something that you cannot take back. Words can hit someone else energetically and be just as destructive as a hit, if not worse, because bruises and bangs will heal. But when you speak words to someone, they will have a ripple effect and they will resonate within their energetic system for a long, long time. And we can look to people in their childhoods who have been mistreated and misspoken to. I used to work at a psychiatric hospital, and I saw tons of children on the children's unit that I worked on, and the effects of what it looked like for their self-esteem and their psyche and their energy systems at large because they were spoken to in an abusive way. So please make an effort to prevent in all situations where if you're being triggered and you're frustrated because a team member did this or didn't do that, you have to get yourself back to your center energetically where you're coming from a place of love and you're speaking your truth from that place of love. So if you're in a conversation and you feel the defensiveness coming up, then just be honest with the other person, be vulnerable, be open. And say, listen, I'm feeling as though I'm getting a bit defensive and I don't want to be that person and I need to go and take care of myself. And then whatever you need to do to go take care of yourself to get yourself through this, whether you need to go take your anger out on something in a healthful way, like going for a run or what have you, or ripping paper or writing an angry, frustrated note and ripping it up or burning it in a safe way, then do that. Or if you just need to go and sit and meditate to get yourself back to center, whatever the tools are that you use to get yourself back to center, where you are indeed in a place of curiosity and really wanting to learn and really wanting to sit down with the other person. And depending upon the level of intimacy in the relationship, you will possibly say to them, listen, I really need you to take me inside of your head and help me understand how you were thinking about this, that made you say this or that made you do this, so that I can understand better and I can free myself from having these thoughts of anger towards you and move into a space of forgiveness. And if you do that, you will be in a place of power. The other thing that can happen in the conversation is the other person can become defensive, or they'll begin to close their energy off. Depending upon how connected you are to your intuition, you will be able to decipher whether that person is going into a defensive place or a closed off place. The way to handle that is not to say, you're defensive right now and I'm not having this conversation anymore. The way to handle this is to share your experience. If you always go back to what's authentic for you, then you'll be in a place of empowerment. So the way you would handle this is you would say, listen, my experience of you right now is that you're moving into a little bit of defensiveness. And the person might be like, I'm not getting defensive. And you can say, well, this is my experience of you. I feel energetically like there's defensiveness here and it doesn't feel good to me. And I really don't want to communicate in an environment where there's defensiveness on my end or your end. And so here's what I'm going to do. I love you and I care for you and I want to continue having this conversation so we can come to a resolution. But I need to do it when we're both in a place of wanting to learn about each other, our emotions that came along with it or our thinking that came along with it. And so I need to go and take care of myself and do blank. And then you set a time for when you would come back and have that conversation, especially if this is in an intimate relationship. And when you continue to show up in all of your relationships this way, certainly you would handle things differently for the people in your life that you are paying to do a job, if you do have team members or you have employees. And with those kinds of people, the technique that I recommend for that is something called Carefrontation, where you would go into the communication with them and you would first give a compliment and you would say, this is my experience of you, or, I'm really appreciate you being available to take the time to talk to me if that's all you can reach for in that moment. And then let them know this is what I'm observing is the second part of this. And then moving into this is working for me or this isn't working for me, or what's going to work for me moving forward. And you have the ability to come at it from a place where you're going to allow the person to be in a space of accepting and hearing you, because the whole goal of conscious communication is to be heard. And if the other person is not going to hear you, you cannot force them to hear you. And it's also about both parties taking full responsibility. So being willing to take responsibility for perhaps a miscommunication or a misunderstanding, that is also a sign of self-mastery. As you put all of these tools into place, you will need to go and have some clearing conversations, most likely, because these are all new tools to you. And I encourage you to do so with a gentleness for yourself and a gentleness for the other person. But at the end of the day, what's most important is that you are taking really good care of yourself in all of these conversations, not just the ones that you need to have for getting people into this place where you're now communicating from a different foundation and you need them to be on board with you, but also going forward in all of your exchanges with everyone in your life. And communication is a really beautiful tool. When used properly, it has the ability to transform and allow a beautiful breeding ground for true, authentic, and vulnerable and meaningful and empowering connection. And I wish that for you in all of your communications.